full keels, clipper bows with bowsprits. It was a classic design built with modern materials, and they never bothered with things like racing or performance, only the boat's ability to go cruising.
This week on Everything You Need to Know, we're talking about Bayfield.
Bayfield is an interesting boat builder to talk about because it's one of those boats that you'll recognize from a nautical mile away. No matter which model or design it is that you're talking about, Bayfield made these boats so characteristic that there's just no mistaking them. Bayfield didn't bother with building race boats or high performance at all. They just wanted to send people cruising and doing more long passages than anything else. And while they were made here in Canada, and the Great Lakes are littered with these things, I have seen them up and down the East Coast and in the Bahamas. A man called Ted Gozzard founded the company in 1973 in a city, surprise, surprise, called Bayfield, Ontario, hence the name. And he started the Bayfield we all know and love with the Bayfield 23, which sort of later became the 25. I see these things everywhere on the Great Lakes. For a 25-footer, the boat shared a lot of design features that bigger, more traditional sailboats had. I particularly loved the little wooden bowsprit on these boats that gave it a really Bayfield characteristic. The 25 also sported more headroom than any other boat of the same size in competition at the time, to keep it true to its cruising intentions. Almost 10 years later, Ted Gozzard left the company he founded to found another sailing company, the new company he called Gozzard Yachts, but he left Bayfield in the capable hands of his little brother Hayden. Under Hayden's leadership, the company grew and had to find bigger facilities, so they moved to Clinton, Ontario. Sadly, Bayfield met a tragic end in 1988 when a fire destroyed the plant, and ultimately the business shut down for good. There was one attempt to revive it by one of the dealers of Bayfield's with some financial backing from other people, but it never came to fruition. Bayfield, being such a local boat for me, turned up a lot on my boat shopping list. I mean, more than once. When I had my first boat, a Chrysler 22, I was looking to upgrade because that's what you do when you have a 22-foot boat. And of course, the Bayfield 25 was on that list. I have also sailed on two different variants of the Bayfield 30. The 30 is an interesting boat because, while I know it as a 30, it's actually a 29 that became a 30 and became a 32. The Bayfield line was always as well made as can be expected at the time, and they sailed like tanks, which is actually really good for the Great Lakes because the storms we get here are a lot pointier and the waves are closer together than what you might have on the ocean. And on a Bayfield, the detail and the teak work has always been very beautiful. I really do love the look of these boats. The problem, and ultimately the reason I've never personally owned one, has always been interior space for me. The size of, say, a 30-footer, the interior feels more like a 26. When I looked at the 25 to 30-foot range, I was looking at everything from Bayfield to Payship, and I needed a fairly cheap boat bigger than my 22. And after looking at so many boats, many of them were Bayfields, I ended up buying a C&C. It just made more sense for me. And while the C&C was not as pretty as the Bayfield, the C&C was more of what I was looking for. It was faster and more nimble and more tender, and it honestly felt a little bit bigger inside. But if you want something more traditional and less plasticky than the competition, with a big full keel, the Bayfield might be the way to go. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to keep this channel improving. This week I'd like to thank the newest patrons, Matthew and Bill. Welcome to the team. One thing you guys might notice about this episode is the audio should be different. I'm using a whole new microphone. And on that note, in the coming month or so, I'm going to be in a whole new recording environment with like professional grade lights and this professional grade microphone that I'm using right now. So let me know what you guys feel about the audio specifically for this episode. And then later, let me know what you feel about the new studio and the lights. It's going to be really, really epic, really beautiful kind of place to record. And speaking of Bayfield, I'd like to talk about one model in particular for a minute because it's the closest thing that I would choose for my first Caribbean sailing boat, the Bayfield 36. The Bayfield 36 was designed by Hayden after he took over the company and moved it to Clinton, Ontario. They started building it in 1984, and they stuck to the same proven concepts that Bayfield had become so famous for. A big, heavy, full keel boat that was roomy enough to take long-term cruising and tough enough to handle it. The bowsprit was back and pretty as ever. It had a cutter rig because you just have to have a cutter rig on a boat this pretty. You need 2 foresails while you are under sail. And trail boards and a raised counter transom. It just topped off all the looks and all the teak you could ever ask for. The 36 also boasts some proven Caribbean cruising design features. If you've ever looked at like a lower budget Caribbean cruising boat, like say sub 40 grand, there's certain things that you're looking for in specific. This thing's got a keel hung rudder so you can hit logs, which you will. It weighs 18,500 pounds, so you can get caught out in the ocean during some bad weather, which you will. The list goes on. For a long-term cruiser, the draft is only 5 feet, so you can go to the Bahamas and probably only hit bottom twice, which you also will. It's got a 44-horse Yanmar diesel, so it can get the mileage and the power that you need in between refueling as you're bombing through the Caribbean. And tankage, she's got that too. I mean, it's nothing by today's standards for water storage, for example, but on a boat from the 80s, designed to be on the Great Lakes, it's got a 100-gallon water tank, and that's not a bad thing. My 35-footer, just 1 foot shorter, originally only held 30 gallons. So 100 gallons and 30 gallons. 100 is more. I actually increased the carrying capacity on my boat to 110 gallons, and I found that more than adequate for 2 people. And if you're having people come visit, the 36 will sleep 7 people, 2 in the V berth sort of thing, and then the rest of the people sort of need to know each other. There's a double berth on one side in the salon and a single on the other. But then in the back, you get separate aft cabins, they call them. It's sort of separate beds with doors so that you have some privacy. And it also came with hot and cold running water and a seawater pump, so you can do the dishes without wasting the fresh water. A review in the magazine Canadian Yachting outlined it best. When it comes to an old-style boat like the Bayfield line, people will argue forever. It's an older-looking boat made to newer standards with newer materials, and you're bound to have some haters for that. The more traditional sailors that I know love the Bayfield, and they appreciate the timeless looks and features of a wooden bowsprit cutter rig kind of a boat. But the more progressive sailors that I know, they admit that they appreciate seeing a Bayfield cutter under full canvas for its beauty. The design just isn't something that they want to live with, and I guess I sort of get that. If you live on the Great Lakes, you've undoubtedly seen a Bayfield or 10. And I think of all that I've seen and the few that I've actually sailed on, I have to say I've fallen to the camp of the latter. I love to see the cutter with a bowsprit and full canvas go by, and I can appreciate how truly beautiful that is. It's such a traditional sort of look for a sailboat. But I also fall into a bit more of the progressive camp where if I've got to live with it, I'd like something of a little bit more modern standards. And now I say that having done a lot of miles in a late 70s designed IOR boat. And while the beauty of it is nice, the day-to-day cruising life, for me, I don't know, I'd go a bit more modern. That's my thing. We'll see you guys next week.